Dude, I flashbang myself every morning when I like have to like get a package or my lunch or whatever, and I just open the door and it's just snow everywhere, and it's just like there's just like the outside light and shit. Like that's like an omega flashbang.
Do we know? You know, the first
Were you recording?
flashbang of the day you get is whenever you actually turn on your computer monitor. Let's be real for a second.
My
Tettles, were you
computer
recording
never
that?
turns
That
off.
should have been the intro.
I have it. Yeah, I have it recorded. We can start right there. All right, welcome back. We're on episode 25 of The Bench, powered by Wowhead. And this week, we have some PTR to discuss as the PTR has finally come up. In addition to that, I'm kind of hoping that we get a date for 11.1 in the near future. I suspect that it's going to be coming soon. We also
start working on that, Squishy. You know, Squishy will get us some updates during this episode. Don't worry.
It's actually tomorrow, Growl. Plunderstorm. Plunderstorm's tomorrow.
Woo, Plunderstorm.
You playing Growl? Or you still in the hardcore?
Plunderstorm. I'm definitely gonna give it a little bit of a whirl. I'm still waiting to see if something gets announced for it. I feel like a lot of the hype around it last time around was like the tournament or whatever. What are you guys laughing?
Growl literally only plays Plunderstorm so he can play it competitively. Very good.
Like, okay, it's like, but I'm all right. You asked me if I'm playing. You know, like, you know, it's one thing if we're talking about the game, but you know, if we're just talking about practice, like, I don't know, you know, it's different.
What if you like you have to grind the mounts and the pets? You're forced to get.
Yeah,
all the
see, for me, playing actually means playing, right? It means okay, the game is out. I'm gonna play it and enjoy it. For everyone else, and while playing means, are you going to run into the gas until you're level 40 and then unlock every content and then never open it again? Like, in my opinion, I'm much more reasonable when I say I'm playing. So I don't know. You guys can make fun of me, but. I mean, I think to me, I thought the last Plunderstorm event, like the tournament thing, was so freaking cool. I think Peekaboo and Zaryu like shredded everybody, and it was so fun to watch. There was also so many. I think it was like, was it Nagura and Annie Fuchsia? I think was a team that like did some fun stuff. Also, I became mortal enemies with Scryte because he chased me down in one of the decider games. So like, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff going on. Even if I'm not invited, it'll just be fun to watch and like think about, you know. Like I think the fact that when there's a tournament, it means that there's people playing it seriously, whether it's me or other people. And then when there's people playing it seriously, it just makes everything more hype. I don't know.
What do you think of checkmate format, just in general?
Ooh, I have no idea what you're saying.
Checkmate format was the format that was used for the tournament. Like after you
the Apex Legends thing?
Yeah, after you bypass a certain point threshold, you had to win a lobby to win the tournament.
I think it was fine. In terms of competitive integrity, it's like pretty shit, but like it's a battle royale, right? Like it's not really supposed to be that there's not supposed to be that much competitive integrity. It's a for fun event. And I think that like I would never be a professional Apex Legends or Plunderstorm player with this format, but I think it was fine for the purpose that it served.
I'm excited to see if they make any changes because they literally haven't said shit on it recently.
Yeah,
it's been pretty quiet.
I mean, they announced that it was going to be on the same map, and that's pretty much the only thing that they even said about it, right?
Yeah, I think they mentioned new abilities, and the Plunder Store, and I think that's the only thing that they mentioned because the right side of the map was pretty garbage, and I hope they at least do something there. But like, we'll see.
I will say, and it's not like the end of the world, but it will be, I guess, slightly less hype if it's just like the exact same thing over again. Like it's kind of weird. I think that they're keeping the same map. I do think that can actually be a good asset, assuming that the new abilities are like super solid. I do worry that it might feel kind of samey. That's maybe just like a gut reaction. But I mean, overall, I thought Plunderstorm the first time was sick, and I'm excited to see it come back again.
Yeah, there's a big discussion about the map. I was a big change the map Andy, mainly because they already have all those assets in the game. Like, it's not like they need to design a bunch of new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I sort of understand where, like, you're at risk of making the whole game a lot worse if you end up choosing a map that's bad or that people don't like or isn't, made well.
Yes.
My favorite ever, not that I'm a big Fortnite player, but I love the idea of parts of the map changing. So like, Squishy commented the right of the map, like the Witherbark Troll Camp being a little bit dry. Like whatever, put a goblin invasion there, and then like change up that whole area. And then like I think if they bring it back once a year as an event, maybe just like change 1/5 of the map or something and put some funny, and it could even be related to whatever the patch is, right? Like because it's the Operation, Mechagon or whatever, like put a bunch of goblins there, and then maybe
Okay.
it's all like void stuff the next
Yeah.
patch or whatever. That's what I would like to see. But we'll see. You're right in that they've been very, very quiet about it. I think at a bare minimum, if they change up the abilities, it'll be fun. And I don't think this is necessarily like a huge event. Everybody logs in, we play it for a month straight kind of thing. But I think it'll be a nice, fun thing to do with your buds when you're bored.
Yeah. I think like I would love to see, even if they don't change anything else, just small changes, like a small event. Maybe add like airdrops or something that you can fight over, or just like it doesn't need to be crazy. Like small one-time events, like as Growl said, a goblin mining camp shows up, and you can go kill them for extra loot. Xal'atath shows up and does something crazy every so often. Like just a small, like what is it called? A seasonal affix almost.
Seasonal affix.
Xal'atath drops out of the sky,
What a
drops
great
orbs
idea.
on the ground.
You gotta
Oh,
grab your
What was the
Raz
guy?
against shows up.
balls.
The opulence looking dude. Like if he got replaced with
guys were-
something Xal'atath themed.
Yeah, that guy kind of sucked. I'll be honest. That guy was
Yeah.
like, I get what they were trying to do with that guy, but that was a huge miss.
Well,
They should
I-
definitely take that out and do something else.
I think that there can be a win with that kind of thing, right? Like say instead of it's
Yeah.
the Lord of the Gold or whatever the guy's name was, it's some like a Xal'atath themed thing that like is a lot cooler.
I mean, also it was just worthless in terms of power. Like it's no Baron or Dragon or from League or anything like that.
Oh well, yeah, okay, yeah.
It was
sure.
a waste of time for the most part. But yeah, I mean, I won't be around for launch because I'm going on vacation. But I know that there are quite a few people that are excited to play it.
Oh, dude, we gotta get a guest for next week because you're gone. Oh no, we gotta think about this.
Oh yeah, and we didn't have an episode last week. Sorry everybody. I'll take partial blame. I was like pretty sick. I had like I don't know if you want to call it a throat infection or something, but it just like hurt to talk. I'm still kind of struggling. I'm just going through cough drops as we talk now, but I think we're fine.
Yeah, you gotta get well. We got the new patch.
It was also hard because like the PTR was coming out, and we were just gonna be like, we'll do an episode where we just sit here and we don't the PTR is about to come out, but we have nothing good to say yet because we don't know, and it's like we're like screw it. So we've appreciated the viewership very much across every week, and we want to keep up weekly episodes, but that was just a specific week in recovering from holidays and lack of content right before the PTR and being sick, and yeah, so appreciate you guys for sticking with us.
Okay, let's talk about the PTR then. So the PTR launched, had Operation Floodgate, had tier sets available for testing. I think D.R.I.V.E was available for testing on the PTR. Was there anything else?
It was a lot. I mean, the patch was basically done.
Yeah,
like
the patch is mostly done. Like
done is a generous word.
Well, there's also
the features were there.
There was raid testing as well that already started.
Yeah.
They did heroic bosses like Friday or something like that. So
yeah, there was raid testing Friday. Yes,
I think it's.
I did not pay attention to any raid testing.
Yeah.
I think
I
it's
heard
like
though.
done.
I heard the raid testing and like that sort of schedule is very, very aggressive. I haven't looked at it, but talking with the Echo guys, they basically, I mean, I'm sure there's other reasons too, but they were basically like, it's very hard for us to even do TGP right now because of how aggressive the PTR and the raid testing schedule is. Like there's just so much stuff going on, and them building up the content.
I mean, I think
rushing it. Well, I mean, they don't have a date, right? Like it's still going to be a while. Do you think? Right? Like I expect still at least another 4 weeks.
So they actually mentioned in their raid testing post that they apologized for what was the exact words here? You may notice that we plan to test 4 raid encounters on January 24th. We understand this is a long day of testing, but the schedule allows us to test our mythic changes earlier and thus gain more time to iterate based on your feedback. We appreciate your flexibility. So they acknowledge that yes, like it is a lot quicker testing, but it seems like they're using these extra time to try to make better mythic encounters.
Yeah, I will say I think that's maybe a little bit of some like smoke and mirrors. Typically they start their testing a lot earlier than this. I feel like they would have ripped the PTR maybe like a month to 2 months ago. And so I think it's a little bit of a condensed schedule due to the holidays.
I thought it was like generally like a 4 to 6 week at most for big patches.
I think it's normally like 8 to 12.
What is Squishy? Squishy's an expert on.
I honestly don't really typically do raid testing, so I don't.
Oh,
really know.
okay.
I pay attention to it, but I don't actually do it.
Beginning of expansions are like way longer. Like you get like 3 months.
Oh
of
yeah,
raid
beginning of
testing.
expansion is huge.
Yeah, beginning of expansion, like you get like 3 months of raid testing. Typically in between patches, they normally get the PTR up pretty quickly, like after the Race World first is done. And then they, start sprinkling in raid testing a little bit after that. So this one, I think, has been extended a little bit, just mostly due to the holidays, if I had to guess.
Yeah, this boss on screen though looked.
This is
kind of
sick.
cool.
This is a sick fight.
Visual clutter when this electric shit goes on right now, but holy crap, does this boss look crazy? And this is like the 4th boss of the raid or something like that. But have either of you played Katamari Damacy?
I'm familiar with it. I have not played it though.
I thought that's a map on Super Mario 64, right? Katamari Desert, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
No. Anyways, it's that is this boss. If you know what that is, you get randomly some people randomly get chosen to hop on a rolling pile of garbage, and then in order to make basically there's like a massive garbage pile that you need to soak up, and the people with the small amount of garbage need to roll over other garbage piles to make their garbage pile bigger, so they can then absorb bigger garbage piles to eventually detonate the bomb pile. Like, it's kind of like you can see a couple people on screen like rolling around on the balls, and there's different sized like garbage piles in green until they make a massive garbage pile that they can then ram into the boss or that giant bomb in the back to detonate it. That's this boss.
With the rolling on it, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's what
I
mean.
mean. You see them rolling around.
Yeah, that's actually insane.
Yeah, so basically they missed the bomb there, so that's gonna go off and explode them. But basically, like, you need one person to detonate into the bomb, like go to max size, then detonate the bomb, and everyone else needs to can detonate into the boss, which makes him take like percentage health damage. It's kind of cool, but also crazy.
I think that overall it's like that was a cool fight, and that one actually got a lot of pretty positive reviews. I feel like during raid testing, more often than not, people are more or less dooming about the raid bosses, but that one received actually pretty good reviews. In other stuff, I mean, okay, what were you gonna say?
It depends. I feel like the heroic bosses people generally like at this point. Like, I think the difference between heroic and mythic is pretty stark. Usually the mythic mechanics sometimes just add a little too much and make it very unfun, but.
So for Mythic Plus stuff, the only dungeon that we actually have available for testing right now is Operation Floodgate. So they're doing some like weird testing schedule where they're only letting a couple of dungeons be tested at once. The only dungeon that's available for testing right now on the PTR is Operation Floodgate. And honestly, whenever I did this dungeon, and you guys can weigh in as well, I actually thought the dungeon wasn't bad. I thought the pacing of the dungeon was actually quite good. I thought the bosses were fairly solid. I did have a couple of complaints about maybe some of the trash mobs. The density of the trash packs, they felt a little bit close to one another. It was pretty easy to body pull some trash. There was also, there's always going to be some complaints about very specific mobs. But ultimately, I thought the identity of this dungeon felt pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, so right away here, one of the big things that you notice is the changed visuals on the ground.
Yeah,
that was the thing that stood out to me when I was first watching this, was that this has been a complaint that we've had a lot, and basically, like, they tried to make visuals more themed and more cool looking rather than, like, visually accurate, And, like, usually they give you the benefit of the doubt, but sometimes there can be really annoying visuals. They've done a lot improving the visuals over the last couple patches, like at the end of Dragonflight and in this expansion. And this is like a whole nother level. Like now they're even leveling up again with how clear it is. It's, you can definitely see when you look at some of these things that they stand out a little bit and they don't, from a lore perspective or like looks, it does look a little strange, but at the same time, for gameplay, it is so nice to very clearly see the outer bounds of these swirlies and like where exactly these markers are. And I think this is a very, very good step in the right direction. And I was really impressed with this right away when I saw this.
Yeah. The funny thing is, you see those cones on the same pole that now just look so awful in comparison.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
So the defined edge of this cone is like here, but you don't see it, and then like you compare it to those red swirlies that we had just like right before that, and it's like really definite
it's night and
edge.
Day yeah. So like the next thing I hope they do is cones now. So, but the word swirly has a very distinct meaning in WoW, and now those are no longer swirlies per se. But I think
circle. Yeah, that's a good point.
I
we'll still call them swirlies, but that's a circle now.
I do think the
I will
VFX is good. Like, I think that this changes.
absolutely.
It's very player focused, and I think in a very solid way.
The one thing I'm concerned about actually is if people confuse these telegraphs with the soak me telegraphs.
Oh, okay.
Because the only difference between the soak me and the don't soak me now is that little like I don't know what do you call it, like a funnel, like a hurricane, a tornado
Like a
in the
puff
middle.
of dust in the middle of
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
in the middle. It like swirls up from the middle. And if that is hidden, I think that could cause a problem when both are an encounter. If you know that like there is no soak mechanic, it'll be really easy. Like, okay, all these telegraphs are bad. Just get out. But I think if you're brand new to encounter and don't know, there might be some confusion which is which. We'll have to see how that plays out.
So you're saying that
Ooh.
because the visual contrast in the middle of these swirlies is a lot lighter than it is normally, and that's like kind of the same visual contrast that they've used for the soak me mechanics?
Do you know like the Rashinan soak? Like he moves Rashinan moves platforms, and then there's that that circle that you need to soak.
On.
I forget what it's called. It's like let's see here.
Yeah, I think sort of what Squishy's saying is that like generally the soak mechanics are a lot more distinguished and outlined and clear, and then
Yeah.
the swirly mechanics are just kind of like there as part of the
Mm.
terrain. And now that the swirly mechanics are so distinguished as well, it's a little bit harder to tell the difference. I think that's a very easy problem to solve, and I think that they just need to now update what a soak mechanic looks like. You know what I'm saying? Like I think
That would
Squishy's
work.
mentioning like, you know, how it has the little inner swirly hurricane, like that's sort of the soak mechanic, but you know, put something in there, right? Put a little target, you know, sign or like an X or something in the middle, like make another distinguishing feature to show that that's a soak is what they need to do.
We'll see if it's actually confusing. Like it's just one of the things that I'm definitely. It should be. Is this heroic?
Yeah.
Yeah, that thing. So like, it's definitely fainter. It's not as clear outline. But if you couldn't see that stuff in the middle, that little funnel,
Yeah.
you could confuse it as a swirly or new swirly, I guess.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair criticism.
Especially if it's a one person soaks one, because usually when one person soaks those, the center funnel goes away.
Exactly.
At which point, I don't know. So we'll see if it is. I mean, we'll have
Sort
to see
of.
this new rate.
One thing that I'll say though is I think in general when it comes to soak mechanics, they only really exist on bosses, whether it's dungeons or raids. There's not too many like, you know, random soaks that you just have to like hurry and do. And I kind
Sure.
of feel like at this point WoW is that advanced where you just are sort of expected to know what the bosses do when you go into the encounter. You know, like even if the Rashinon Swirly looked very similar, it's like, okay, well, if you're doing Rashinon, like you should know what that is, right? Like
Mhm.
you know that soak is coming, and you shouldn't be like, oh no, I need to get out of this.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with that. I feel like there's very little, you know, like there's the first couple of times you're in there is complete blind play, but in general, more often than not, yeah, you're gonna have some awareness of what the mechanic is. In addition to that, we also saw some new affixes. We saw the Pulsar affix, I believe is the name of this, where this is the successor to Oblivion. So no longer are you gonna have those Oblivion orbs that like spawn in a circle around the mobs and try to come in and contact them. Instead, you're going to have orbs that spawn off the players in a static like distance away from the players, and you have to guide your orb into allied players. And I mean, you just basically have to soak it within, I want to say it's like 15 or 20 seconds of it starting. Yeah, I think it's something like that.
I think this is one of the easiest affixes I think they've
it's
ever
so
made.
easy. And
It's,
then
well, it's easy, but it's kind of nonsense because like, do you soak somebody else's or do you push your orb into somebody? You know what I'm saying? Like there's lots of moments I see where people are losing movement globals because they're trying to guide their orb into somebody while that person is trying to go into an orb and they're kind of
Fair.
like dodging and stuff. I mean, by far the worst part about this affix is I have to hear Dorky say "somebody grab my ball" over and over again. Like I don't, it literally took like one dungeon for that to proliferate, and I'm just like, oh no, this cannot be a meme.
I like. I think if if the thing traveled faster, it wouldn't be an issue. But the rate that the ball circles is so slow that I think you could easily just like coordinate both essentially.
it's a little bit slow. It's actually surprisingly slow.
I thought it was gonna be like like orbit, you know, like once every 3 to 4 seconds or something.
Yeah, no, it is like once every, you know, probably like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Honestly, huge dub. I think this is the theme that they've gone in these affixes of, hey, they give you something new to think about, they spice things up. Maybe there might be some overlaps, but they're not that crazy. They also, in a previous patch that we talked about, unified the debuffs, like the negative implications of when you mess it up. So there's not really going to be like, certain affixes that feel very checkmatey. And I'm all for this. I don't know. There's a lot of talk about Mythic Plus right now that we'll get into later as well. But I think I'm very happy with this Zalateth's affix situation for keys below 11 or 12.
The downside of this Pulsar affix as well is kind of similar to the Oblivion one. Whenever a contact mobs, it gives them DR and it makes them do slightly more damage. So,
well, that's how all of them work now, right? Every single affix, if you fail it, gives DR and damage.
Yeah.
As opposed to like healing the mobs and stuff. That was
right, healing them or like whatever. Yeah.
Which I think the unification of it is pretty good. What were you gonna say?
I agree. I was gonna say this dungeon though, it felt good. The bosses weren't terrible, and some of the Mythic Plus bosses that we're expecting coming up look terrible.
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah, they got some bangers coming out. So this boss I think is very, very interesting, and there's not too many bosses that you want to think and kind of like change your plan accordingly. But basically the way this boss works from my understanding is it has a bunch of ads with it right away, and it keeps spawning them. So basically it'll spawn a bunch of ads. You want to kill all the ads, and then once you kill them, it activates a damage, it takes increased damage, and it also pulses damage to everybody, which is like very important to decide when you want that, right? Like you may say, hey, let's hold damage a little, like let's wait 5 seconds. Oh, our healer's not ready. There's tons of reasons that you may want to hurry up and get to a damage phase or a vuln phase. And then on top of that, when you after that phase, it spawns more ads, and then you have to decide again when you kill them and how you kill them. So it's a very, very interesting like decision making, cleave, like what sorts of classes do you have when you pop your cooldowns. But from a gameplay perspective, like if you're just kind of a noob doing a weekly whatever, it's very simple, right? Like you just blow up the ads, kill the boss, like dodge the swirlies. I think this is like it's hard to say because obviously like when you get into high keys it's different, but this was like one of like the coolest design bosses I think I've seen in M Plus so far.
Yeah, I agree.
In addition to that, I think that there's actually like a really big advantage of fast pushing these mecha drones compared to just like maybe other times like you would maybe like hold all of your offensive CDs. Those mobs actually do a lot of damage to you. They actually cast an ability called Shoot. They all also have unique effects. Whenever they hit like 100 energy, one of them will start like a cast that has to be kicked. One of them puts those blue swirlies on the ground. They all do like slightly different stuff. And so you're incentivized to have more single target damage for those burn phases, but at the same time, you really can't be lacking on AoE.
Yeah. That boss reminds me of the first boss of Miss, except instead of a giant tree, you're basically AoEing.
The first boss of Miss. Yeah, kind of similar to that. Yeah, similar vibe.
That worries me a little bit because the first boss of Miss is not my favorite, but I guess the problem with the first boss of Miss is it's so binary. Like it's okay, it does literally nothing, and then as soon as it hits the embrace, then it's like doing crazy damage. And I think this one feels a little bit more smoother and a little bit more like, rewarding different stuff to me.
I think it's better. Like the damage jab isn't as powerful, meaning that when Miss, when you fail a damage jab, you're like, well, we have to do another full cycle now, and that just takes time. Whereas this one, I think the damage jab is only 100% or something like that, so it's not nearly as powerful. Meaning you don't rely on the damage jabs as much.
The boss is also not immuning itself. Like there's a difference there too, right? Like the boss is not immuning itself.
He does eventually.
Oh, he does eventually. Like how long?
He does eventually. If you go back, you saw it in your thing.
I didn't catch
that he was immune.
Go back. Here.
He's actually immune here.
Yeah, I think it's 80% on this boss. So it's not the 99 like on Miss. Like 80% is still like if he's at 1%.
No, Miss is 80, I think too, right? 80 or 90. So okay, so this is all right. Maybe I got shot down a little bit because I didn't fully understand the boss. It does feel a lot like Miss to me. Maybe this is like preventing cheese that I'm not really thinking about. But like I sort of think that like if you want to kill all the ads but one and then just sit there and fight the boss and get no damage amps, like that should be an option. Like to me, that's kind of cool. The fact that like if
Yeah.
you're in a safety weakly no lever pug, like doing some weird strat that's like slow but safe, I think that decision making is cool. But maybe I'm missing something with why they're doing
It
that. But to me,
looks
that the whole like you need to burn down, like I don't like that they, to me, what I think is cool about this is it gives you the decisions for how you want to play the boss. And so
Yeah.
when they take away those decisions by, oh, if you don't burn the ads in X amount of time, it takes away a little bit from the fun of the boss. But still, it's still a good boss nonetheless. It was just maybe a little bit less magical than I thought.
Yeah, it's also 40 seconds of ability to actually be able to do damage to the boss as opposed to the Mysterious Scythe, like RNG duration on whether or not you're actually able to do damage to the boss or not.
Yeah.
Man, I miss pings. I've been playing a lot of Classic lately, and there's no pings in Classic. And like, you just do this thing where you're like, hey, this guy over here, what guy? This guy, look where my character's facing. Look, I'm jumping. Me, I'm marked with star. And it's just like, man, pings have been the greatest addition to the game since Mythic Plus, I think.
Yep. So, Tettle's wiped on the mini boss.
Well, there's
so more comment about this trash too, by the way. So I haven't played this in like a serious setting or whatever. I've just been watching a lot of streams and getting a vibe from it. But
yeah,
to me, I like the way it's laid out. It feels like there's lots of different packs. You have a lot of decisions with what you want to pull. Also, now this isn't necessarily true for the whole dungeon. Well, okay, this mini boss is out of control.
I mean,
but,
yes, this one was a little bit.
But I would say for the most part, my first impression with this dungeon was that they were trying to simplify trash a little bit and like not have so many. And now, again, this isn't always true, but did you kind of get that vibe of like the way that the trash was laid out and like it was more about just like dodging and doing damage and taking damage rather than like complicated stuff? Or is that just me? That was kind of the vibe that I got, was they were trying to simplify the trash, at least in this first part of the dungeon.
It feels like there's a lot of unavoidable damage to the point where the route is kind of designed already for you. I was trying to figure out a way to actually be able to combine a bunch of different packs, but they designed a decent amount of mobs like in direct opposition to how other mobs work. Like you saw in this pack that we wiped to here, somebody accidentally body pulls these snipers, and then basically this blood warper is okay, so it's arguably overtuned. It's similar to the Shrouded mini-boss mob, and so it's arguably a little bit overtuned. And if you pull any of the snipers that do unavoidable like shoots on players, yeah, you're basically just gonna wipe to the blood warper. Whereas like these soldiers that were standing next to it really didn't do a lot. And so I think that there's like a bunch of packs that if you accidentally pull them together, they're very dangerous. And I think another one is like these mobs that do the staple gun ability that root you to the ground. Say you body pull the mech that's up here, the mech 3000. This mob does a chainsaw ability beneath your feet, and say you get rooted by the nail gun, you just immediately die to the chainsaw that's beneath your feet. And so I think that there's like mobs that are directly opposed to one another with how they're working. But it simplifies the routing, Growl.
I see. Okay.
Regarding the trash, though, I actually don't remember any important kicks. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that was at least maybe what I was judging it by.
Yeah,
snipers have like, kicks. Yeah. I don't know if anything was like important though.
It's not like kick or die, right? You have like the mass AoE fears and Stonewall. You have the volleys. Like there's like the channel beam, but that's stoppable. Like these shredders don't have anything except the sob. Like I actually feel like they took a step down, which is what people have been asking for in terms of Mythic Plus complexity in this dungeon.
Yeah.
The only thing that I remember is that beam, but so many things can deal with that beam. You can kick it, you can grip it, you can knock it, you can, knock it up, you can do so many things with it. I actually think the trash, while some things may be overtuned and just in terms of raw damage, I feel like the amount of kicks that you need this dungeon is very low.
I actually agree. I didn't really think about that until I'm like watching it back. I actually don't think there's that many kicks in this dungeon just in general, which is nice. Like I think that kick is like, I feel like kick has been way overused the past couple of patches. In fewer interrupt packs and more mechanical complexity of trash mobs, I think is way more warranted and honestly just like refreshing.
Yeah.
These there's some stuff that's obviously overtuned. Like you see on screen here, these saw blades, basically how they work is it's unavoidable, like you're gonna take damage from them, and they tick you every 0.2 seconds and they do fizz damage. And so some specs or some classes like priest get immediately killed, where me on my moon can actually don't take that much damage, and so it's like,
Yeah.
I think just in general as well, like if you're accidentally stacked on top of another player, you get two of them spawning on you at once. Like that mob feels a little bit rough. There's a couple of mobs that feel a little bit tough, but those are things that whenever I watch them, I'm like, this is fixable.
That's just the tuning issue.
Exactly, of course. Those are fixable things. Like I'm like, all right, we can work with that.
I think we should talk about this boss then. This is probably the hardest boss for pugs, I think. It's another boss. We have to kill the bosses at the same time.
Yeah.
And basically the main mechanic is the boss drops like 6 bombs, I think it is. Can you go back?
Yeah.
The boss drops 6 bombs on the ground, and you have to detonate probably on a 10 at least 5 of them. And there's 2 ways to get rid of them. One is the boss will charge 3 times at a random player, and every bomb that the boss hits will remove the bomb, as you just saw there. The second way is one person will have a dispellable debuff. I think it's probably at the start of the phase.
Well, no, I'm getting it right here.
Oh, okay, yeah. That dispellable debuff, which when dispelled will also kill any of the bombs that it's around.
Yep.
There are 2 ways to do it, and you have to get rid of probably at least 5 on a 10. You'll have to get rid of all 6 on a high key, but like that's fine. 3 charges though, I think that's more than enough. Then you have the backup of a dispels. Like, how do you feel about that?
I thought it was pretty easy. Again, I'm playing like in this group, dude. I'm with like a bunch of title range players. I thought it was like relatively easy. I mean, like even right here, as long as you get, 2 of them, or like one or 2 of them hit with a charge, like it's actually relatively easy. It does require a little bit of pre-positioning to make sure that you're going to be able to hit them. But like, I mean, we were hitting like 2 and 3 pretty consistently. And it, like, obviously if we got even better positioning, like say we were positioning better, it would be very, very easy. And then like with that dispel circle, you can hit 3 pretty reasonably with it. Maybe it's just a thing where we have people who are like really watching their positioning, and so it was easy for us. Maybe it would be harder in a group that's less coordinated, but I didn't think it was too bad.
Yeah, so to me, I was getting very much Siege of Borealis vibes, or the first boss with the bombs, and by that I mean like you kind of have to be forward thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like as the boss charges the first time, you have to be thinking like, okay, where are the other bombs? Where should I be standing?
Yeah.
And sort of like pre-preparing yourself. And Squishy's not wrong. Like pugs, especially people who are not familiar with the dungeon, who don't have a lot of reps in, will not be ready to do that, right? Like this clip, sorry for the audio listeners, but is a perfect example of Petals being in a terrible spot where like the first boss charged and then he wasn't near any other bombs, and then it targeted him and he had to sort of like yeet himself over. I really like the design of this. I think the idea that there's 3 charges and also then it gives you the freebie like blow up at the end, so you can kind of like, okay, where did we mess up? Let's grab that. I think was really, really good design.
You actually get 2 dispels. When you saw the first time,
you get 2 per phase. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
When you saw the first time, a second one goes out. So you get 2 dispels, 3 charges.
Yeah, so I think I like the design a lot. So the only thing that I worry about, and this is starting to trend as we get later in the dungeon as well. So the whole idea of like making a lot of like dodgeable mechanics and unavoidable damage on paper sounds sort of reasonable and less complex. But man, is it so hard for healers. Like when you create an encounter where you're constantly having to run around the room and do tons of dodging, and there's unavoidable AoE, it gets like you start to enter the territory where like, you're wiping because of a healer, and like people don't like to invite certain classes because they're not good at healing on the move. And I feel like that was a very tough part of some of the dungeons in the last couple seasons, was the whole like you need to heal a lot and move a lot situations. And I hope they don't go so much in there. Like I don't necessarily mind rare fights like that, or like one or the other, but when you constantly pair high movement with high unavoidable damage, it's very, very dangerous for like more inexperienced healers or inexperienced groups, because in a high level group, you're planning out your cooldowns, you know what to press, and also people are using their defensives, their potions. In a less organized group where you don't have that stuff prepared, it just feels like there's no counterplay. And then what happens, oh shit, healer, GG, leave group.
The
etc.
dude, it's so weird because whenever I think that exactly the problem that you're explaining is why healing is in such a precarious position right now. I don't know if you saw this recently, but people are doing the first 4 bosses of the raid without healers now, and they're just using the signet ring gems to be able to substitute for a healer. And it's like, it's such a weird spot because if you take away this damage from like a dungeon in any capacity, then you start to have situations like we had in the middle of Dragonflight where people just like stop playing with healers. And it's just like, I don't know, there's a weird line that's tough to actually get like a good balance of like what is requiring a healer, where is the healer rewarded and accepted, and it feels pretty good. But at the same point, like, if you make it too easy to do without a healer, people will drop your healer, and like that's I think a terrible position to be in too.
So that it's like a very tough it's a very tough thing to balance, and I don't want to get super in the trenches of it now, but I think what Blizzard needs to realize in the direction that we need to go is that healing doesn't need to be super hard and stressful all the time.
Yeah.
Like the fact, like if there's certain dungeons where healing is very easy and you're just payphoning, I think that's okay. And that's way better for the health of the game than tons of dungeons where healing is insanely stressful, mainly because it feels like for 80% of the group, they have so little control over what's going on and they just kind of like bleed out and die. And in general, that's just like not fun for the game. And I think that I just think that in general they just need to consider that healing being easy isn't necessarily bad, and if they want to force people to play healers, they should just do that with other means other than trying to design the game around it. Because I feel like in a more casual setting, people just will always bring a healer anyway. Like there's no world where in weekly, 10s or like in Pug first 2 mythic people we're going to be like, all right, we're running no healer, that's the strat. Like they would have to really miss an encounter design for that to happen. So I mean, like if they make it so, if you're doing a high mythic plus key, you literally have to have a healer in your group or it doesn't let you start the key, like fuck it. That to me, that's a way better solution than like overcompensating by design and like adding all of this crazy unavoidable damage.
I'm down. I think that's I think that's a reasonable solution.
I just think they overcook a little bit, and I feel like I don't necessarily mind. I sort of came full circle around this, and Dorky kind of made fun of me about this because in Shadowlands that was sort of the problem, right? Where it was like all you care about was healer DPS, all the encounters were easy to heal. And so then in Dragonflight, what did they do? They added so much unavoidable damage, and it's like, okay, I'm personally having fun, right? Like me as a sweaty idiot who plays 14 hours a day, has full mythic raid gear, has a team that presses defensives, I'm having fun and everyone else is in pain, right? Like you can't really design an encounter where someone like me or JB is going to feel super challenged and excited, and someone who's just like, hey, I'm healing because my friends like to play WoW and I'm just doing a weekly 10 with them also has fun. Like that person is an ultimate misery if me and JB are having fun and being challenged. And I think that they just need to take it easy a little bit with healing difficulty in dungeons right now.
The problem is that's not only on the healer, but their entire group that they're healing. Because if there's one thing that other people hate, it's dying, having even pressed all their buttons. Whether or not they pressed all their buttons or not, that is a separate story. But even if you did, dying to getting no healing is frustrating as heck.
Oh yeah, it's the worst.
I think it's also a situation where like it's not even just dying to no healing, it's dying whenever you feel like you didn't get enough healing, right? And I think a lot of the times too, like in lower level keys, the importance of the healer is actually increased a lot relative to what it is in like higher keys, because whenever your players aren't pressing your defensives against the correct or appropriate thing, you actually take probably 25 to 30% more damage, and it's just like, all right, well this was unhealable, like I don't even know what to do about this, GG I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we saw how... Now, granted, I don't know if this is necessarily true, but the way people feel is that the meta is so important. Like, we saw at the beginning of this season how crazy people were for Resto Shaman.
Yeah.
Like, if you weren't a Resto Shaman, you weren't invited. Nobody gave a fuck about you. And then as soon as Disc Priest became popular and that became a thing, everyone else was extinct then too, and now everybody was playing Disc Priest. You can kind of see the shift of at each key level there, right? And it's like... you can see how you know, while it's true, right, you see that little spark of the other different healers that can heal the keys, the public perception and the way people feel is that you need to have the right healer class to do those keys. And I think that making healing a little bit easier gives you a little bit more leeway. Like, there's always going to be at the highest level a very high concentration of whatever's best. But I think that, you know, the meta healer being defined by what does the most damage isn't so bad. Everyone kind of was freaking out about it in Shadowlands, but at the end of the day, like, that's only really a high keyer problem, I think, you know. And in a plus 10 and a plus 12, you just want a good player that will keep you alive. You don't really care that your X healer is doing, you know, 30% less damage than a Disc Priest would, for example.
I agree.
Yeah, tough. I think they don't really balance healer DPS all too well. And I think that's maybe my biggest complaint with it. Like, if they could get it a little bit closer, that'd probably help. Like, the issue with healer DPS is that, like, a different healer spec can do 100% more damage than another one. Like, I think a Disc Priest might quite literally do twice as much damage as a Restoration Shaman right now.
Yeah.
And, like, that doesn't feel, like, super great.
It's sort of one of those things where, like, when you're at a lower level, those trade-offs between healing and survivability feel reasonable because there's so much leeway, you know, like, hey, do we want a healer that feels snug and safe like a holy priest and is easy, or do we want a healer that's blasting tons of damage? Like, that's a reasonable trade-off if you're like not a wow sweat, you know, omega high key pusher. But when you're doing high keys, you just need all the damage you can get. Like, the idea, like, let's say Og just does 30% less damage than every other DPS, you really wouldn't be bringing it, right? Like, Og has to do competitive damage. But at a low level key, bringing one guy that helps the survivability of the group if he's a good player is like a reasonable trade-off, right? Like, for most people. And I think that they sort of designed that idea of, like, you know, okay, this healer does more damage. That's what makes it good. But in a high Mythic Plus scenario, it doesn't really work out that way.
So funny enough, we were talking about healing a little bit. This boss, on the other hand, while that other fight actually had a lot of movement and a lot of damage that had to be healed, Swamp Face, not actually a ton of damage that needs to be healed. It's like a pretty slow passive healing fight.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can see the raid frame is basically there, just like slowly going down. Realistically though, the only way you die on this is if you get hit by those waves, of which
Tettles, he literally is about to say, "Oh, this is a really easy fight to heal," and then just 50 waves of everything from every direction come out, and everyone explodes.
Let me explain.
This was literally a boss that I was thinking about of, like, as an example of, you know, okay, obviously if you're doing everything perfect, it's easy, but like for a pug, this is like, imagine you're a healer in this 10. Like, this is a nightmare. Like, all these waves everywhere, there's so much movement, you're getting yoinked by some idiot boomkin. Like, this is, I think, possibly a very stressful healer fight if there is too much damage. So I hope that they keep it tuned so that it's not so much damage, but like, there was so much movement and position, like, requirement in this fight that this was one of them that I'm worried about. That's like, you know, when you're doing a plus whatever of this, like, is this gonna be so much damage that your healer is losing their mind, like, trying to figure this out?
These are a lot of waves, I will say. It's a lot of dodging.
It's a lot of dodging, but also there's nothing else going on, right? Like, to be clear, how this fight works is the 3 DPS and the healer are
the tank cannot get linked.
Are arranged in pairs, randomly chosen. And if those pairs ever separate more than like 13 yards apart from each other, they will yoink the other person to them. So basically, you and your partner are going to have to do all this dodging while linked together, and which almost kills Tettles there because that warlock almost went straight through a tiny gap. But like, it's not mechanically not a complex fight, right? It is literally just stay with your partner and dodge. But the healing check, as Grau said, it lives and dies by the tuning of the healing check. Because if your healer cannot heal this, you're done. But also, if the healing check can be increased by, you know, your damage dealer is actually eating shit on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, so the heal check is attached to a dot, right? So the dot gets applied every, I want to say like 30 seconds or something like that. And it's like a 20-second dot on you. And so then there's a little bit of leeway where you're not actually taking any damage and the healer's able to get you topped back up. But it's fairly constant damage on the entire party for the most part. Then this is probably the hardest mob in this dungeon, which
Bubbles.
I actually think that this mob is if you're actually pretty coordinated with your group, I actually don't think it's too bad. But I think that if you're in a pug, this guy is absolutely brutal. So basically the premise is you want to stack up and just move as a group and drop all these puddles on the exact same spot. And this backwash ability does an aggressive amount of damage to your entire party and puts a dot on you that actually requires pretty substantial healing. So if you're actually playing too spread for one another and you're not dropping these puddles in a good spot, it's actually pretty obnoxious. I think that this guy is so annoying for pugs.
Yeah, now you see, like, this is the direction I'm seeing, right? Of, like, there's these bubbles, there's this movement, there's stacking, there's group damage, and I could see that this could be, this could get very stressful in pugs for healers.
Yeah.
Of, depending on what class you play, right? Like, this is where I worry that, certain classes, like Holy Priest, for example, that doesn't necessarily have strong burst AoE, that needs to be planted a little bit and cast, like, can really, really struggle with a fight like this.
Yeah.
That guy as well, it's really funny. He used the old swirly animation. I don't know if you saw that, but
Yeah.
it just reminded of how bad that animation was. Because you could barely see it on the ground.
Hold on, let me go back. It's
huge up on the new animations. I'm really happy with that direction. I think
look how rough that is.
I didn't really consider that. The only other
it's been ingrained in our minds for years that just looks normal and not paying attention.
Yeah, the only other thing that I even had to say about this dungeon is actually Mindsoothe in here is actually pretty impactful. So there's these crates that you click, and kind of similar to Brackenhide Hollow, where you would actually like Mindsoothe and open up the cages. You can actually just like if you're out of combat, you can click these bombs again. And I wonder if you're gonna like Mindsoothe Fade, or there's gonna be like a soft requirement for Priest in here to be able to like skip some trash packs with Mindsoothe and Fade, and they just like click this bomb pack.
Yeah, that's another thing. Speaking of like meta and class relevancy, that sort of comes into play is when people get used to having that class, right? When it's like, you build a route assuming that you have a priest, and then like, oh, what do? We don't have a priest, and it sort of limits that play space where even if priest isn't that much better than everything else and everything else is quote unquote viable, it's like, as someone who's putting together a group, like, why don't you just find a priest? And I feel like I hope that isn't the case, and sometimes there's like a lot of factors that add on to each other. Because like for instance in BFA it was like Shroud, right? Like you had to have a rogue, Shroud, and then like eventually it became Mindsoothe, and it kind of changes depending on the meta and the dungeon design, and I hope that isn't the case, but it does sort of seem like every time it's like there are certain classes, like for example Shaman this season, that just feel mandatory. Like, while you can switch out certain things, like what group didn't have a shaman that was playing this season? Like none, right?
I think
it's pretty reasonable.
Do you want to talk about the last boss as well?
I mean, is there anything you wanted to say about the last boss?
Mostly that there's more AoE damage. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, this was another guy, right? I'm trying to remember if you could bring it up, if you don't mind.
Actually, these two trash mobs are probably worth talking about as well. If you want to just go back real quick, these two mobs in front of the last boss are disgusting. Like every 4 seconds, they put out swirlies on the ground. They have to dodge. They're constantly pulsing AoE damage to the raid.
Yeah.
These two are absolutely disgusting. One alone is brutal.
Yeah. Now you see what I'm saying about this, right? Like it seems
I guess
so many of these encounters just so like look at how much movement this is. Like, if you're not a very experienced healer that's like, sequencing all your buttons and like, it's just so much movement. Like, I get, it's basically like we're realizing that having tons of kicks and complicated mechanics in the pack is bad, right? And so we're trying to like make things more quote unquote simple. And while swirlies and damage is simple, right? Like you understand how to do it, it's still very, very difficult. And it's something that a lot of healers will struggle with. And I think that combining these two things over and over and over again is really, really tough. Like it's hard to say, right? Because we don't know the final tuning. We don't know how healers are going to feel, but I just, anytime there's a season where there's like tons of this moving and like this is another boss, right? That does this thing where it's like lines here, unavoidable damage. And it's, in this clip or in the current tuning, it doesn't seem like that much damage, but like, yeah, it's just so much movement, like swirlies, lines, circles, damage. And it becomes very, very stressful from a healer perspective. Because like as a DPS, if you mess up your cooldowns or if you do a little bit less damage, like it's not your team doesn't wipe. Like it's bad. Your damage is bad, and if you want to be a better player, you need to deal with it. But like, it doesn't become a pass fail thing if you're not handling the swirlies super efficiently.
What would be the solution then? What do you think it would be?
Yeah.
See, like having the healer have no job on any fight and just be able to tunnel
Yeah,
heals isn't like really
the
effective,
more I think
right?
about it, the more I think healers should just be such a freaking payphone role, and like they should just make it more. Like I know it sounds terrible, but like they just need to be careful with how much they challenge healers here.
The healer identity just as a role is really weird because they also nerfed tanks this season so that healers could heal them more, but honestly, your healer's still not healing your tank. Like,
no, they completely missed.
They completely missed the mark on that. Your healer's still not actually able to out heal anything with your tank, and your tank is living or dying basically purely off the back of them being able to make like proactive plays to save themselves, and it has absolutely nothing to do with your healer. And so the healer, again, just the identity of the role itself is in a really weird state, in my opinion.
Right, and let me be clear too. I've mentioned it a few times, and like it may sound like I'm down. I actually think the encounter design in these fights are very good.
I like the fights. Yeah,
I'm actually very impressed with this dungeon. I think this is a great dungeon. I'm just voicing my concern as to what could go wrong. Like that's my only thing is I just hope this doesn't become like a another. Everyone has those dungeons where it's just like scary to pug. It's very hard. There's so many healing checks. Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's the only thing I fear when I've been watching this dungeon is like, man, this could be really hard depending on how it's tuned for the healer.
Well, to be clear, to kind of expand this, that's every dungeon. Like if you've seen any of the data mining posts, like every dungeon is getting mass AoE on trash and bosses now. Like it is a very clear across the board thing, like in workshop, those horrible drills after the first boss, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yes, the ones that are in the Cujo area that do the AoE.
The frontal that was terrible. They removed the frontal, which is good. They added another ability for your tank. And then the little the circle thing, right? That you just got out of because it did nothing unless you were in it.
You just outrange them.
That was changed to an AoE damage ability, which hits everyone now. It's like 5 seconds of an AoE. Like across the board, it's very clear that they are making that their design for healers right now is mass AoE, unavoidable on everyone.
Yep.
I mean, I guess that's fine if you tune it to be like low enough to where it's the healer is required, like the role itself is like valuable, yet it's I don't know, it can be fine. I don't know if it's going to be great, especially in like an infinitely scaling system. I feel like at some point it's obviously always going to be like pretty obnoxious, and is that level going to be 10 or is that level going to be 17? Like at some point it's always going to be like, wow, these mobs do way too much damage. It's just a question of when.
Yeah, I feel like the hard part is like how much Mythic Plus scales.
Yes.
Like mobs can do 200% damage or they can do 800% damage, and it's like I get that high keys there's going to be some crazy changes, but the difference between doing a low key where people press defensives and then doing a high key if people don't press defensives is like the raw amount of healing that you have to do is crazy, right? So like I think the benchmark that I think they need to get to, at least in my eyes, when they have a lot of these mechanics that are like group damage, is your healer's job should be to top everybody up in between damage events, right? Like basically everybody takes a burst of damage. If they're topped, the damage event shouldn't really be lethal. Like it shouldn't be like you have to have a defensive up or like huge healing CDs rolling during the damage event. It should be like, okay, everybody's really low now, and now it's the healer's job to get everybody topped efficiently until the next damage event. The problem is like World of Warcraft, and that's sort of like a little bit older school mentality of like, managing mana and deciding what spells are most efficient and, keeping up timing and deciding when to heal and when to damage. But World of Warcraft is just like so far gone and so far like advanced now that, like there's a lot of healers that don't even use mana. Like Disc Priest doesn't, like the idea of what is efficient as a Disc Priest isn't even a thing, right? Like you just press your Mindbender and you just blast and it just heals everybody, and it's like it's hard to, I don't know. World of Warcraft healing is definitely fun and challenging, and I enjoy it personally, but I'm trying to just I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, but I'm just a little worried with how difficult, if they're relieving some of the pressure off of DPS, trying to make it so there's less stops required, less coordination, etc. If they want to keep the difficulty high, a lot of that is going to fall onto the healers and tanks, right? Otherwise, all the dungeons will just be super easy. Like if they're just keeping everything the same but removing all the complicated shit, then everything's just going to be a face roll. And I feel like the difficulty is leaning on the healers and tanks more the last two expansions.
I will say, like, whenever you increase the number of kicks and stuff like that are required for the dungeons, the only people that actually helps out are like the high-end players, right? Like the high-end community are the only people who actually benefit from stuff like that, from being able to completely mitigate any of the damage that they're taking. Where like the healers and the tanks are still going to get smoked by all these interrupts that their DPS aren't kicking anyways. Like, dude, if your DPS is a monkey and they're not pressing their interrupt, like there's going to be no difference.
Exactly, right? That is true. That's a funny way to think about it. Is like at a low level, it doesn't matter whether it's avoidable or unavoidable because they don't avoid it. Then at a high level, it's like, yeah. So that's an interesting way to think about it.
I think the biggest thing that I think the community has talked about is just like the tanks are just not fun right now, especially with those nerfs. Like, and those are the limiting factors for groups.
I don't know how to fix. I feel like tanking, the issue of tanking is such like a nuanced thing. I actually don't know if it's something as simple as like unnerf the tanks. Like, I think that there are some people who would directly benefit by like buffing tanks and making them OP, but I think it's like a cultural thing of like why tanks aren't played that much.
I think it is that, but also I honestly don't. I will bet that Blizzard thinks tanks are fine right now.
Ooh.
I would bet money on that.
Interesting.
I'm on a recent development. I believe that there should be no rotational CC in the game, including Avenger Shield kicking and Augmentation Evoker upheaval. I think that there should be no rotational CC in the game at all, where you press a damage ability and it CCs the mob in any capacity. I think that is absolutely absurd that is a thing.
But yeah, I would bet you that based on their design mantra for tanks, they think tanks are perfect right now. And I couldn't fundamentally disagree more with that statement. There are so many things wrong with it, and the baseline of it, you can name any amount of things. Tanking is not fun. That is the full stop right there. You don't need to say anything else. Tanking is not fun. And I think they need to change that, or else group LFG is still going to be a crapshoot.
I think it's fair. I think that's totally fair. I think that like, I don't know if it's ever really going to be solved, but I think it can definitely be alleviated by making the role better.
Yeah.
Venge looks good. Next patch. Their tier set apparently is insane.
Their tier set's insane, and that's why it looks good. But guess what happens to overperforming tank tier sets or tank damage?
Well, it'll be pretty easy. I'm predicting the future here. Instead of that meta proc that they get from their tier set actually contributing to Demon Surge, it will not contribute to Demon Surge, and then it will suck again.
I mean, that's basically it. Like their mantra on tanks is like tanks can't deal damage. Tanks need help from healers to be healed. When everyone's like, please no, let me be sufficient.
Yeah,
and that's a start.
That's totally fair.
I'm gonna be a classic Andy, but I think that the solution in classic is so freaking funny because it's definitely not on purpose. But basically, the way it works in classic is warriors are the most OP class in raid. Like a good raid would just be like 30 warriors or something, right? But warriors have to tank in dungeons. So basically, like, if you want to be OP in raid, then you have to be a dungeon tank. That's essentially how things work in classic. And so there are a very large amount of warriors and a very large amount of tanks, but like you have that incentive of like you're super giga strong in raid, whereas it's almost like kind of the opposite in current retail, right? Where like it's actually kind of annoying to find a guild and like not great for you as a tank, because like generally there's always like one main tank who's like the leader or the officer, so there's like one tank slot per every single guild basically. So if maybe I don't know, maybe they need to relook it or rethink at some sort of relationship there between like tanking in dungeons and being in raids, and like I don't really know.
Well,
if
I don't really have a great answer there, because I mean retail is so easy to like play multiple specs and have different gear sets and your tier set switches. So I don't know, maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. It's kind of funny to think about though.
It comes down to tanking isn't fun, I think, but also it's just difficult. I think you mentioned earlier healers might need to be payphone. If there's a role that I think tanks might need to be payphone more than healers.
You might be right.
Because let's be honest here, like a bad healer, you can maybe scrape by using defenses, off healing stuff like that. A bad tank, your tank dies, your group's wiping. So who knows? We'll see what they do.
I've been preaching this for a little bit now. I think the complexity of the game is just a little bit too high. I think they could cut back on every single role, and probably everybody would benefit from it a little bit.
Maybe to say just the complexity of survival, right? Like maybe if you go in a dungeon and you can survive, you might not do optimal damage. Like maybe doing your rotation perfectly still could be very tough. But just being able to go in and live as a tank or heal as a healer is more easy. Like lower the ceiling, if you will,
Stop the one shots,
or not the ceiling. Sorry, lower the floor, right?
Yeah.
Like keep the ceiling high and because I think that's a big part of what makes WoW Retail special is the fact that classes can be so complex and you can be like such a master of your class that you're like someone like Evade or Fired Up or Gingy, where you're like diffing people who are crazy good, and you're still like there's no way that person could do that sort of damage. But I think that's important to keep in the game. But I think like lowering the floor and allowing you to at least like live and dabble in the events is important. And speaking of lowering the floor, now the most important part of the patch here is what is it called? Just drive?
Yeah, it's D.R.I.V.E is the name of it. And
please inform us what D.R.I.V.E stands for.
These robots invading very
efficiently.
Yeah, expeditiously.
Energetically.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. Does it actually stand for anything?
I don't know. I was just thinking what you would say.
Oh, good bluff, Squishy. Good bluff.
Yeah, thank you. But like it's kind of cool. The mount can go on water if you're going above a top speed. But the second you drop below that top speed, you're sinking and getting demounted. You can see that here, like going super fast, boom, riding on the water, and then you slow down and you're done.
This feels insane. This gives me very similar vibes to the first time we were like dragon riding during the Dragonflight beta, and you're like, wow, this is so fast. And now Dragonflight and like dragon riding is just like second nature in terms of like the speed that you get. I wonder if D.R.I.V.E is going to feel kind of similar, where it just becomes this speed becomes the new norm, because you are zooming through the zone.
It has a couple problems right now, though. Unfortunately, this isn't me, by the way. It's my coworker. I don't know how people feel about it. Is this something you have to test about before? But the way the controls work is instead of like actually turning, like using A and D or whatever you want, if you press W, you're going in the direction of wherever your camera is.
Ooh.
So if you spin your camera 180, you are immediately doing your car will automatically do a 180.
I see.
So it's not like, I call them kind of like tank controls. This is like wherever you are pointing the camera in the direction you want to go, and your car will automatically turn.
So it's not like you're holding right click. If you hold left click, it turns you. That is so strange.
It's right click, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's wherever your camera's going. The second issue is that it is you can be attacked while on your mount, and you can be dazed off your mount. So you can be going, 100 miles per hour, and then suddenly a mob just hits you in the back, and you just suddenly dismount.
Can tanks be dazed off their mount? Like, or can you like
can't be dazed? Period.
Can you use?
So funny because it seems like it was like a very poor workaround, right? Because I'm pretty sure the way it works from what I've seen is your range is still really small. Like it's really hard to aggro anything when you're driving.
Yeah.
But if you do happen to drive directly, like it's almost like they're like, let's just make the minimum aggro range like as small as possible and then just see if it works, as opposed to like actually trying to fix it or change the way the coding works with the mounting. And yeah, I don't know. It feels, I mean, to me, with the intention, when I watch these sort of clips and I'm seeing it, like the intention doesn't feel like you're supposed to get dismounted, right? Like it feels like you're supposed to have a seamless experience where you're driving around. So I think that they need to look at that when they're, a mob dismounting you, or like, also there's like some weird terrain sort of things going on, right? Where like it's sort of like dragon riding, where like you might feel like you're flying and then there's like one little twig from one little branch that just like, you go face first into it and it like halts you completely. And I think that's really, really disorienting in this sort of gameplay as well.
I agree with how fast you're going as well. Like things fly by. Which leaves to the last problem that at least I am, and I know at least a couple are, is we get motion sick using this feature.
That's crazy.
The FOV. So when you get into Drive, the FOV doesn't zoom out at all, which means you're using the same FOV that you are using when you're playing your regular character.
Okay.
And for how fast you go, that FOV is not significant enough, like zoomed far back enough for us not to get motion sick.
I get like really bad motion sickness, typically not from video games. I hope I don't get motion sick from this.
The only other time I felt motion sick in WoW is when you remember in Legion they tried to zoom the camera in because people were using people were using a command to zoom the camera really far out.
Oh yes, I do remember this. Yes.
And then they met people halfway because it was the Legion beta, I think. They zoomed the camera in really far. And me and a bunch of others were like, this gives us motion sickness. We cannot play on this FOV. Please help.
Yeah.
And they met us halfway and did that. This gives me a similar vibe. I get motion, like it takes me 10 seconds to start feeling motion sick off Drive. It's not good.
Just because it's like too zoomed in on your guy.
Yeah, like with how fast things go past, the FOV is just a little too far zoomed in. Also, yeah, you can see a grouse said there, that little golf.
And your game just crashes. That's perfect. That's so appropriate.
The game crashing there is that goes so hard. You know they're gonna be like, dude, check your internet.
Yeah, for the audio listeners, he's showing a clip. We'll maybe leave a link to it, but basically he's just like zooming around on a track, and then he hits who even knows what he hits, like this little pole, and then not only does he go from full speed to 0 instantly, but then his game crashes.
That is an elite clip.
Yeah, so it's a good system. It is fun, but like the only way I can drive around right now is to hold my camera really low to the ground. So
you have maybe it's an FOV thing explicitly. I was thinking like maybe like mess with the speed a little bit. Like could you somehow like lower your max speed if that would make things easier? I'm not sure. I'm not that experienced with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried a couple things. I've just been driving around slowly, like no boosting, like just camera low to the ground. That's fine, good enough for me. But I'm the type of person that like if I can't play an FPS game under 100 FOV either, that also gets me sick. So that's just my experience with these kind of things. And
is it just me? Does it feel like not WoW? Like, it just feels like a little mini game. Like I guess dragon riding to me didn't feel like not WoW. It was a little weird. So like for example, anybody who's done questing when you're leveling in either expansion now since dragon riding, it's really weird, right? Like basically like you'll get a quest and it'll be like, okay, go to this area, kill these moles, and then you'll get on your dragon, you'll press boost, and then you're literally like there in 4 seconds. And it like doesn't really feel like natural travel. Once you're out of that sort of stage and you're just like going from zone to zone or dungeon to dungeon, I don't think dragon riding feels so bad though. But like my first impressions of this is that's like it's a cool mini game and it's fun, but it doesn't really feel like that much like WoW, you know?
It reminds me of like a Star Wars like racing game, like
pod racing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's something similar to that, where you're just like actually doing something like pod racing, like literally. I haven't thought about it in so long, and it's just the way that you said that. It's just something about like the speed of which you're traveling, and the way that it feels like kind of gimmicky, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, it's just so different, right? And
exactly.
The reason I bring that up
not
is
bad
like,
way. It's different from WoW normally.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up though is to me, when it comes to like being gimmicky or being not really like WoW, it will be a fun patch feature, but then like, do they keep iterating on this? You know, like if this feels like a lot of work being put into a system that might end up getting thrown away or disregarded very quickly. You know what I mean? Like there's so much, like don't get me wrong, I love everything they're doing with this. I love the tracks. I love like, you know, changing the way it handles. I love like being able to travel on the ground fast, the customization of your car, being able to like put parts on it and stuff. But in 2 patches from now, like in the next expansion, is like, what is this system gonna be? You know, like I feel like almost dragon riding kind of fell by that too, of like they started off building this whole system. Remember, you would like bring your dragon to the little mount thing, and you could like
Yeah.
change the horns, and
Yeah.
you would use like. But that's total. Like, when's the last time you guys have customized the dragon? Right? Like now, you don't even do that. You just go on your store mount cat or whatever mount that you have, and you fly around. Right? Yeah, God. I mean, I do it too. I do it too. Right? And it's like, to me, it feels like I'm a little bit worried that this is a lot of work being put into a system that's going to get like put away quickly. Now, granted, if they keep cooking, right? If it's, you know, like so far over the last 2 years, it's been dragon riding, Plunderstorm, you know, dragon races, D.R.I.V.E. Like if they keep coming out with this stuff over and over and over again, then I'm cool with it. But I just get a little worried that they're sort of pitfalling back into the hole of creating content that gets thrown away quickly and that doesn't have longevity.
I actually don't hate. Okay, so with like dragon riding and stuff like that, I actually like the fact that they kept it in terms of like the sky riding, and I think that felt good. I actually don't necessarily want them to keep this past this patch, and it's in a weird way. It's like I don't think I want to see us on Invincible speeding through every zone at 700%
Invincible on the ground.
Well, you get what you
wait,
see what I'm
wait
saying.
a second, that sounds sick.
But like
Wait,
you know what I'm saying, right? Like that would be insane if you're speeding on Invincible at 600% movement speed. Not that they can't.
What's the one rooster mount, like the chicken
Exactly,
or whatever?
exactly.
Oh my God.
Imagine if you could do D.R.I.V.E. on that.
Exactly, your drive on your magic rooster. I feel like this could just get retired after this patch, and I would probably be okay with it.
I think it just depends on the reception, right? Like with dragon riding, I think they probably, and similar to this, they would probably design it as an expansion feature. And due to the overwhelming success of dragon riding, they're like, okay, let's convert this to a mainline feature. We'll have to see how people respond to this.
I think D.R.I.V.E. is badass, but I think there's something a little bit weird about the power creep of like ground mounts to the point where okay, just it's an insane way of describing it as power creeping ground mounts, but like it's almost like it's too fast.
I agree with too fast. Now, what this could turn into is, you know how they have like the Plunderstorm? They could have, you know, a racing cup event every so often.
That would be cool. I'm okay with this.
True.
Like, you know, they design, you know, a good 10, 20, you know, like Mario Kart. You just have, you know, your Grand Prix, make your time trials, get your best times, score high, get rewards. That'd be cool.
I'm in. Like you zoom, they release like it relative to different zones on a per month basis. And this month we have Tanan Jungle, and you battle tracks through the Tanan Jungle. That would be cool. I think that's sick. I think that what wouldn't be sick is like if this completely replaced like ground mounts.
I think I would probably agree with that. I think I would like it to be a patch feature, unless the support for it is overwhelming. But even in this zone is tiny, by the way.
Yeah.
You can't go very far very fast at this speed. So I would love them to keep this feature in a separate mode. Whatever that may be.
Also got cruise control. What's cruise control do?
Isn't that it keeps your speed in a car? Do you not use cruise control on the highway, Tettles?
Oh, okay. I know what cruise control is in my car, man. I don't know what it means to drive. All right, I'm over that. Moving on. We have an Ian Hazakostas interview, which, you know, this was kind of an interesting titled interview by PC Gamer. It was titled World of Warcraft's competitive dungeon mode is struggling. And there was basically an interview with Ian Hazakostas where they were talking about just what was going on with Mythic Plus and kind of just like what the state of Mythic Plus is. Nothing that's like brand new. And in this interview, Ian gave what I would describe as fairly lawyer-esque answers, talking about things like, he says, well, if people who have really enjoyed Mythic Plus gameplay in the past are feeling frustrated, today we agree that's a problem. Like, okay, thank you, Ian. We knew that you probably felt this way, but I feel like the way that they titled this was a little bit misleading with what was being said.
I mean, a little bit. I mean, player sentiment right now on Mythic Plus, I think, is rather tough. People are definitely feeling frustrated due to any number of reasons. I'll be honest. I think it is perfectly valid that people are frustrated by the season.
Yeah.
I think even individuals don't exactly have identified what exactly the problem is. Probably because it's a multitude of factors that happened simultaneously.
I think
it's up to Blizzard to figure that out.
I think it's a bunch of different stuff, including the game, just like itself. I think that the game also just isn't attracting, I feel like Dragonflight on release had this like newness to it that kept me playing for a really long period of time each and every single patch. And War Within hasn't necessarily had that like shine to it in the exact same way, and it's not something that I can even put my finger on.
So I've actually I've talked with a few people about this. People who are like WoW enjoyers who tried it and their thoughts on War Within. And what I've gathered is that the problem is the difficulty curve just isn't really there. Like I think what should make Mythic Plus special is you're like, okay, you're at this level. Okay, now you're getting a little bit better and you're the next level and you get a little bit better. And it feels like you have you have a long grind until you get to the point where you're like, okay, it's not worth it for me anymore, but I've put in a lot of effort and I'm happy with where I've gotten. And it feels like right now for people who are like serious WoW players, not necessarily super tryhards, but just people who are Mythic Plus enjoyers, the game doesn't even really start until a +7 or a +8. And then the game gets and they've alleviated this a little bit, but I'm talking about the beginning of the expansion. The game gets very difficult at 12. And it was like you only really have a few key levels to progress and you run into walls very, very quickly. And I think the main thing they need to think about is just the difficulty curve. And I think that the making +12 a big jump in combination with like doing the keystone level squish, I think really hurt the feeling of progression for people, right? Like technically I think you can look at a lot of numbers and think that nothing has really changed, but ultimately like, when you're at a 10 and you're getting your best loot and you're like, okay, time to play Mythic Plus, right? I'm gonna learn Mythic Plus. You start doing 11s, you're like, okay, that's not so bad. Then you do 12s and it's like your success rate literally drops huge. And then it's like, sure, some people overcome it because they're super gamers, but I think that what they need to look at is stretching out that difficulty curve and maybe even considering like I think that the jump between key levels should be less and less. Like it seems like Blizzard has this weird like not liking the idea of like a +37 key. Like I think they are trying to contain things when they really shouldn't. And I think that the more granular each key level jump is, the more it feels fun to progress through the ranks. And like, overall you're gaining more IO score and timing more keys. The main issue with that I can see is like group finder, you know what I mean? Like if there's, if you need to time a 12 to get into a 13 and then a 13 to get into 14, a 14 to get into 15 and so on all the way up to 37, then it becomes like a nightmare. But I think that it wasn't so bad before, right? Like no one really had a problem with it before. Again, the advice that we always give, and I know that everyone hates this advice, is that if you really do like Mythic Plus, find a group of friends and progress together, and you'll see that progression a lot more reasonably. But I understand that a lot of people just like to play in pugs and don't want to have those responsibilities and just kind of do whatever. And I think that for a solo pug player, the difficulty jumps are so nasty, and I think that that's the main thing that they need to look at and be concerned with, rather than whatever else other people are suggesting about like dungeon design or this or that. Like I actually think so many other things about Mythic Plus have gotten so much better. Specifically, I think the dungeon length has gone down a few minutes each expansion, which is very good. I think that the boss design has improved, and there's much less like target dummy, super boring bosses that last too long. They still exist, but they're there. I think that the affixes are so much better. The push week situation is so much better. To me, a lot of the things about M Plus are actually improving, and I think it's just the really jagged difficulty curve that makes things seem so undesirable right now that it's getting people to stop.
I think the difficulty curve is probably the biggest issue that people are facing. People are gonna talk about the meta and LFG invites. I feel like that's always an issue though, at the exact same degree. I feel like that's kind of something that I think kind of came to a head probably midway through Shadowlands, where players really stopped.
I think even earlier.
Maybe you could argue that it happened in BFA, but like there was a point of which you could play whatever, and then at some point people were like not okay with you playing like your bad specialization, and but it's kind of been the exact same since then. And obviously, Ian states it here, perception matters more than reality here, and the data doesn't offer much to comfort someone who's declined because they're the wrong spec. I don't even know how you would begin to fix that. Like that is a tough thing to solve.
I mean, that's right after Ian admits that like success rates are completely even when comparing a meta spec to a non-meta spec. So, but people perceive at that level, you take the meta spec. So I don't know how you solve that.
That is,
I
mean, that's
I
such
don't really
a tough
buy this.
solve.
I don't buy this, the whole idea about meta thing, because like, okay, let's just say that this was equal for all roles, right? Like all the non-meta tanks, healers, and DPSs were getting declined, right? Well, then why don't they just play with each other? Like, like, are they saying that they're constantly playing in off-meta groups and those groups are failing? No, they're saying they don't get invited.
Yeah,
so it's like,
true.
if there were all of these players, tons and tons of players who aren't getting invited because they're an off-meta spec, why don't they just play with each other? And the reason is because the actual problem is that there's a massive tank shortage. And possibly with healers too, it kind of depends on the season and what's meta and stuff, but the problem is that there's so few tanks, and the tanks get to say, I'm only going to play with meta classes, right? Because why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they play with the highest rated people, the best perceived classes? And then there's a bunch of off-meta DPS and some healers left out in the cold. But the problem, it's not like there's tons, at least in my opinion, some people might disagree with me here, but I don't think there's tons of off-meta tanks that, okay, if you're doing plus 17 keys, maybe it might feel bad if you're playing a Blood DK, but if, for a majority of players, I think it's strictly a problem for off-meta DPS. And I think that that's something that we need to look at, trying to change the balance of roles or make certain roles more appealing. It has nothing to do with class balance, or there's no world where there's not going to be a meta and that people aren't going to favor certain classes when there's an overabundance of DPS compared to tanks and healers.
And they didn't talk about the bottlenecking at all during this interview. And I actually wonder if the bottlenecking is really what's negatively affecting the Mythic Plus participation. I really because if we could actually get every single DPS that's trying to get into a group, that would be just a ton more participation for Mythic Plus.
Yep.
What if you made dungeons 6-man? And you just had 4 DPS per dungeon.
Another DPS. I mean,
I still don't think that solves it. I think you would need to go 1-6-1 to match the amount of DPS.
8-man dungeons.
I honestly don't even know if that's enough to match the amount of DPS versus the amount of tanks. I don't even think 1-6-1 is correct. I would wager it's more like 1-10, 1-12.
Do you think there's that many more DPS than there are tanks?
I think so.
I think that it's a very jarring change, and I don't think they'll do it. But I think that doing 1-4-1 and having 4 DPS per group would go a long way to at least, scrape at the problem and get into the meat of it. Because number one, you're gonna have way more DPS being able to get into groups, right? Like a massive amount. And number two, it's not going to feel as class restrictive either, right? Like most of the time, the problem is like there's 1 or 2 classes that you feel like you need, right? Oh, we need a mage, we need an aug, like this season is like we need an aug and a shaman, right? Like technically you can bring a boomkin, you can bring a rogue, you can bring, whatever, but it really feels like you need an aug and a shaman, right? Well, now if there's 4 slots, you have 2 of those flex slots versus 1. And I think that both, adding those extra flex slots and then also
imagine
they're never gonna do it.
No, imagine if you're playing
2 shamans. It's just double aug, double shaman, and everyone's just like, Growl, what have you done? Why have you forsaken us? Tunnels thinks about the situation and then how the community would respond to it, and then just bursts out laughing because he knows we're just a bunch of like sweaty, try-hard, min-maxing idiots.
What would I do if I had 4 DPS? What would I play? 2 shaman sounds better.
We just run all of the fun of the game into the ground.
Oh, dude, I'm such a bad person. I actually think I would actually probably be looking to support like a change to have 4 DPS. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I will say what I do like about Mythic Plus is there's something about the 5-man like close-knit nature of the entire situation that feels really good. I don't necessarily think that would be lost by adding another person into the fray, but I do think that like I really like the closeness of like how the 5-man feels. It's also once you start adding in like 6 players, while it's probably fine to actually be able to like pug and get another 6 player, I'm already having hard enough problems like getting 5 people, like 4 other people, including myself, to get into a group for Mythic Plus. I now have to find another person on top of that. That's kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, but if it's another DPS and it's flexible with what you choose, I feel like
If it
isn't as bad.
If that's true, like say it's a truly flexible DPS, yeah, you're probably right. But like,
I think you're right in this. I think you're right in the sense that like people will be like, oh, you're playing without an int buff. Like now we have 3 casters in the group instead of 2. Like you have to have a mage. How could you not have an int buff? Like I think you are probably I think there's some middle ground in between like what we're saying, but maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic and thinking how much that would alleviate the problem.
I would love to like see the change. Like I think I'm fully supportive of like if they wanted to push for a 6-man and they had data that was like, all right, this will actually help the bottlenecking of Mythic Plus. This will allow more groups to be formed. This will increase the number of just runs that are going to be able to be done. I think that that's something that I'm like way more in support of because I think that there's just not enough tanks.
You could have up to 1 AI per group.
All right, you actually go into your story mode raid and you actually get all of the raid buffs prior to the dungeon. It's totally fine. You know what? This is actually staying.
Wait, hold on. Squishy's cooking here. 1 AI per group. So imagine if you could, let's say you get 3 DPS and a healer and you can't find a tank. You just play with an AI tank.
Yeah. I mean, they have the tech.
Dude, yeah. I was thinking Arcade Intellect. you lost me.
Intellect.
No. I was talking about like the follower dungeon.
I was on raid buff, so you're talking about like an NPC.
Yeah, like the fall from the follower dungeons. Like, I don't think it'd be great, but like people would be playing. You can probably support that up to like a +7.
I mean, dude, people in LFG play with 4 NPCs all the time. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I was gonna say some of the people in my groups are worse than NPCs.
That's what I'm saying. I would rather have Brand Bronzebeard from Delves helping me out.
Brand's a motherfucker, man.
They gotta come with great voice lines for the dungeons, though, dude.
Jesus.
Speaking of storyboard buffs, have you heard about the latest exploits that just recently got fixed?
There's more.
Yeah. You haven't heard?
What is the more?
No, wait, there's more.
So there was a 10% DR buff. You had a priest. This is fixed now. So you had a priest go to the Dream Surge. No, it was Legion. There was a stag in Legion that had that you would mind control, and then you would cast this 10% DR aura on your friendly player. Then they would try to zone out of the zone, and some amount of time it would stick. Other times it would fizzle. You just do it again until it sticks. So then that person would have the buff. Then you go to a dungeon, and now that 10% DR aura applies to your entire group, so your entire group has 10% DR.
That's sick.
Magical and physical.
I mean,
I feel so bad because I just accidentally somehow played this season to like optimal fun. Like I've had so much fun this Mythic Plus season, and I've just dodged every single bullet in that regard. Yeah. But like, dude, I could not imagine if like I was in the heat of it right now and I was trying to like push keys and it's like we're in Legion like mind controlling stags. Dude, and like we have a guy who's got AFK in the Dream Surge to see what the Dream Surge buff is to know what to take, and like I'm jumping in and off of cliffs and follower dungeons to keep Mark of the Wild. Like this is just such a wild season.
It's like it's like you're running track. You're like in high school. You're not even in like college or the Olympics. You're in high school. You're running track. You look to the left of you and look to the right of you on the starting block, and there are these men juicing on steroids, and you're like, wait, am I supposed to be taking steroids? Like, what's going on here, man? Like, am I supposed to be going into the Dream Surge to mind control this stag?
Yeah, so that's a Legion one. Speaking of the Dream Surge, there was actually a Dream Surge exploit that got fixed as well.
Why not? One more.
So you could bring a Dream Surge buff that increases damage done, healing done, and movement speed by 5% for each player within 5 yards. And it stacks.
Let's go
per player. That was a thing that people brought out of the Dream Surge, and it stacked to an insane amount of times. Where was the thing?
Yeah, why not?
I can't find it, but I think it stacked up to an insane amount of extra damage and healing. So yeah, two more just to continue the saga of the Wild West of Season 1 of War Within and Exploits. I'm pretty sure no one's gotten banned.
Yeah, shout out doping, I guess. That's the moral of the story. Shout
Shout out doping. Do not shout out doping.
All right. In other rat-tivities, we have
Oh,
pirate
man.
software from
Hold on,
OnlyFans.
pause the video right here. I need to give some context here first. So I haven't been much of a classic Andy, but this has been the hottest drama going on in hardcore right now. So this has been, basically it happened about 24 hours ago. Asmongold's video has already 1 million views. This clip has 500,000 views. This is like this is crazy going on. So basically they're doing a hardcore dungeon, and they're doing a dungeon that's pretty difficult. Pirate Software, renowned member of the WoW community here. Yeah, you see that? The pirate investigating the pirate software situation by Asmongold. This is like all over. LSF is getting blasted. So here you go in this poll. Basically, they pull a little bit too many mobs, and you see that boss over there that's marked with a purple. He patrols around the room. Basically, they get in a dangerous situation where they pull a boss and too many mobs. And so in hardcore, if your character dies, it's deleted, it's gone. And so they're sort of
He's bailing.
working. Yeah, so they're working together. They're trying to get everybody out. But Pirate Software makes a little bit of a quick exit here. You know, he kind of looks back, a little bit of a courtesy blizzard for one tick, but nah, he's gone. And so he basically...
He's 1 health.
He holds W. Now, is he looking back at his team? No, so he does this weird thing where he puts his health at 1, even though it's not at 1. It's like a stream overlay. So he's looking, right? He's kind of, his whole team's fighting for their lives right now. And he's just like,
I thought this was his actual health. I was like,
no, it's not his health. No, he's full health right now. Full health, low mana. And so like, he's like, look at his team. They're all fighting. Look at their health bars.
This is mana gem, isn't it?
Healer is dead. That healer's character is deleted. Hundreds of hours. Yeah. And then he just runs out of the dungeon.
He's got mana gem, doesn't he? Isn't this what this icon
he has mana gem. He has his pod available, and he has another thing that gives him mana as well. He's gone.
So
now you see, look at his party's health bars. They're still in there. So Snoopy, renowned PvPer from I think he's EU servers.
Dude,
I don't remember. Sorry,
I don't far behind him.
Yeah, he's gone. I mean, they're fighting for their lives, right? Like they're cycling aggro. The healer gets aggro. The healer dies.
We're thinking about blizzarding. Look at this. We're thinking about.
Yeah, we're thinking. Yeah, look at our mouse. We're thinking. Yeah.
That's actually got nothing to do with me.
So we run back, and watch the health bars of his party. Like they're fighting for their lives. Their characters are gonna get deleted. We're out of the dungeon, and then we can still see it, right? Like we still see the health bars.
He gets dazed.
Snoopy is off tanking. He's like switching to bear form to help his tank. And his team is dying. He's like, nah. Like he's not. Look at him shake his head. And it was just a very, very high drama scenario. There's so much funny stuff going on here. Everyone has a take. Everyone has an opinion. Everybody hates everybody. There were beef calls going on. There's a new, apparently the Wowpedia article for Roach got changed, and they just put a picture of Pirate Software's face on the Roach article, and it's Roach Software is what okay, so they changed it back. It was Pirate Software's picture for the Roach article, and it is if you're bored of retail right now and you're looking for some drama, you got to get into this. Even if you don't play Classic, this is so much fucking. I feel bad because Pirate Software's content is so positive, and he's generally like a very good dude, and I feel like a lot of people are almost jealous of his success and have been waiting for a reason to hate on him, but he definitely ditched his boys here hardcore. So definitely, if you're looking for some beef here, yeah, there's news articles and stuff. Like it is wild. It is absolutely wild. So this is my clip of the week. Is if you guys want some drama, go down this rabbit hole.
You know, it's something funny. My clip of the week was also this.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Wait, that's so funny because I just threw it on there because I'm like, I never really do these, but that's actually so funny that you clipped this as well.
Okay.
So so you don't even play this shit, and you
no, I've seen this. This is way too big. I thought this was so goddamn funny that they were bad about this.
Oh yeah, this is glorious. I know that a lot. There's this retail versus classic or whatever, but like, dude, everybody loves drama. You guys know, if you guys are listening, you know you love drama. Get in there. This is great. It's a fountain of drama.
Dude, all of live stream fails is literally takes on the
Yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Is it
yeah. Look
really?
at like, yeah. Go to Reddit live stream fail,
I'm pulling
and
it
I'm
up.
sure every single thread is just this, right? It's just Soda's reaction to this, Summit reaction to this, Pirate's response.
Soda reaction. Soda conclusion on Pirate. Pirate tweet regarding the WoW drama. Day 9 TV on Pirate. Moon take on Pirate situation. Roach out now. Soda, Pirate's not a mage. He's a glorified shadow priest with a power word shield. Just take some blame. Soda. Soda reacts to Asmongold. Soda's first impression on Pirate's POV. This is the most roachy thing I've ever seen. Zaryu's reaction to Asmongold reacting to Pirate software. So,
Yes, it is great. This is a fountain of drama. This is the biggest. This is a volcano of drama.
Joker D cooks Pirate
just...
software. Joker cooks Pirate software again, featuring Grayson. Pirate software on Gold. I was gonna say on Golden Glue.
Oh, I mean, Preach is on here, man.
What is Preach?
Yeah, I'm telling you. Yeah. This is so good.
What is Preach saying?
Full mana bar. That is a lot of ego.
I don't know, you have to tell me.
You have a completely full mana bar. That's a lot of ego.
He knows he's got mana as well. He mouses over the mana gem.
he goes. Preach is just calling his ass out, being like, he knows he's got mana too. He's mousing over the mana gem. Oh god, this is so good. This is an endeavor. Okay, so Squishy is linked. Something in the Wowhead comments. What are we looking at?
So basically, the Mark's rework, Mark's Hunter has a huge rework in 11.1. And Azerothian, our marksmanship guide writer for Wowhead, wrote this fantastic post kind of going through the changes and analyzing them. And then you look at the comments.
LOL, give me my pet back. Happy that pets are gone. Definitely not thrilled about losing my pet. I've been playing the PTR and it feels nice. However, the eagle is such a cool looking animation that he's instantly my hunter's new best friend. I love the eagle. Good riddance. You ain't bossing us around, kiddo.
So literally, it's literally just all about the pets. Like, it seems like the biggest drama regarding the marksmanship rework is about the removal of pets. So if you don't know, they physically removed... So marksmanship previously had Lone Wolf.
Yes.
Which is you gain a damage buff when you don't have a pet out.
Correct.
Now, with the rework in 11.1, you physically cannot take out a pet as marksmanship, and you get this, like, imaginary eagle that helps you out.
What do you mean imaginary eagle?
So like an illusory eagle, something like that. I don't remember. It's like an eagle.
Okay.
A spirit.
Yeah. So and that gives you like your choice of some of the pet defenses that you normally get. You know, that would be like your extra defensive or whatever else.
Yeah, you get endurance training, stamina, or you get bloodlust, or you get
no. Well, bloodlust is a separate button completely for marksmanship now. So marksmanship will always have bloodlust.
So it's what, leech, stamina, or movement speed?
I honestly could not tell you, but overall, like, they have an eagle now. So a big point of like the stuff, if you look at even the marksmanship feedback thread on the forums, a lot of it is talking about the pets, and it seems like Blizzard really fucked up here, taking away the option to have your pet.
It actually is just, it seems like it's 50-50 as to whether or not people like it or dislike it, but there are a lot of people who want the pet back, which is funny because MM, not really a pet spec. I don't think I've seen an MM hunter with a pet out like in a very long time. Almost always are they playing Lone Wolf.
Yeah, but I also think there's like, just like in terms of class fantasy, like, sure, they might be redesigning this for its overall feel and capability in playing it, but I think there's just people who have played Hunter for 20 years who just always had a pet.
Yeah, I suspect that it's kind of something similar to this user right here, where he goes, "Don't take Tipper Canoe away from me. He's the best turtle in all of Azeroth. He saved my life so many times. He's also good whenever I meet new people. Everybody likes Tippy. Don't take my turtle, my tank, my companion." Like, I don't know. Don't take my turtle away. I think it's like people like this where they're like, this is what they identify with.
And like, I know some people will probably laugh at this, but I actually think there is a large portion of the audience who does not raid, who does not Mythic Plus or even do dungeons on a level, that just kind of like their character and have played with this character for years. And I think Blizzard really fucked up by removing that aspect of it.
So what's wrong with Beast Mastery?
I mean, I agree. I think it's just a huge L. Like, I think it's such a core part of what makes Hunter. And I think that there's no reason that you can't just have a pet and then it be dog shit and it doesn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like, why can't you
course.
just be a marksmanship hunter and have a pet and then it just does nothing? And it just, you know what I mean? Like,
Even just
why?
flavor-wise, yeah.
Like, why isn't there just, whether it's a talent node or part of the marksman specialization, where okay, your pet does like 99% reduced damage or whatever, and it's just like I like the idea of like being able to play a certain style that doesn't have a pet. Like I think lone wolf, like there's nothing wrong with it, but like I guess I just don't see why you should force it on people, Like it's just way too iconic of a relationship of the hunter and the hunter pet, And I think that it just doesn't really make sense for them to forcibly remove it when they could have done it in
Yeah.
so much of a, you know what I mean? Like why not just have the pet walk around and follow you and hit shit and do nothing, Like I don't know. It just seems like unnecessary. Like you would think Blizzard would have thought of this or caught this or whatever, or done it a bit
This
more
is
elegant way.
actually funnily enough, I actually think a change for like the 1%, like obviously not like exactly the 1%, but like for the people who actually like to do PvE gameplay, I think that this is actually like a generally pretty good change for them. Pet AI is complete nonsense, and MM was never using your pet anyways. You were always lone wolf for something. So for something like that kind of player, people who actually care about active performance, it makes sense. But I think it's at the detriment of the people that Growl is talking about, where it's like the thematic people who really care about the fantasy of the game. And I think that this is a miss, in my opinion, especially since like all of these people are just basically like, this is not thematic. This is not what I want thematically.
I wanted to bring this up because, like, typically, there is some people who are going to be upset by any change, but this is a pretty consistent, like, there is a large portion of the community who is not happy with this change. And I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard at least says something about it, if not has some way for people to bring back pets, because of there are seemingly a lot of people who want this.
My gut reaction to this is like, I don't know why these people wouldn't also want to like be okay with playing Beast Mastery, but I guess I don't really care. Like at that point, right? Like if Growl said, if you just want like your stupid pet as marksmanship for whatever reason, just because you like how Marks plays or whatever, and you're taking the damage penalty for it, like you may as well just be able to have your pet if you want it.
Yeah, I mean, add a glyph, make the eagle your pet. Or something, or
pet AI sucks, by the way.
Yeah, I mean the eagle doesn't actually attack, to be clear. It's like a spotting eagle.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would like to see this change. It was just a very interesting thing because we just released this. Like obviously we do these deep dives, and sometimes Wildhead comments are not the the best spot, but there's a pretty consistent like I'm upset about this here. And that's interesting.
I think that's I think it was a little bit surprising. I actually didn't know that people were getting upset about Hunter. Okay, last thing we got Q&A. The only question we have this week for Q&A. Make sure you send in your Q&A questions. You can either DM me on Discord or DM them to the Bench Twitter. If you want your questions asked and answered on the podcast, make sure to send those to those sources. This week, we have a question from Logan, and he asks, or he says, several dungeon bosses next season have to die at the exact same time. I feel like this is a bad mechanic for dungeons, but what are your guys' thoughts? Kind of interesting. I normally don't have a problem with like bosses where the damage has to be even split. What are your guys' thoughts? Just like gut reaction.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand where this is coming from.
Bosses.
Like, this is coming from a pug scenario where it's like it feels like a mechanic that's not under your control. Like
I guess
the bosses,
sure.
let's say you're doing the Stone Vault duo boss, the bosses are at 25, and then one of your teammates just pops their CDs and is just railing into one of the bosses, and you're like, bro, switch, and then everyone blows up. Like, I think that's mainly where this is coming from. So there's a double-edged sword here because I think in general they struggle with coming up with good DPS mechanics, right? Like it does seem like a lot of mechanics fall on the shoulders of the tank and the healer. So this is one of the few mechanics that's sort of in their wheelhouse that's entirely in control of the DPS, and I think it should be used sometimes. But I can see why it's super frustrating.
You can have them linked. Like you can have the HP linked. I guess what's the
well? That's the point,
though.
Is it's a mechanic, right? Like it's something that you have to think about. Like they want you to think about that when you're playing. Yeah. Especially with the Stone Vault boss is a good example of like you have to have them evenly, but one of them jumps out, and so you want to be like keeping him low in case he jumps out, and then you hit the other one, and it's like You know, it's a challenge. And I don't know. I think to me, it's not problematic enough that they should do something about it. But I definitely understand why it's like giga frustrating for pugs, because it's sort of the opposite of the healer problem, right? Like as a DPS, it feels really frustrating when you just bleed out and you do everything you can and you don't get healed. As a healer, it feels frustrating when your DPS are just railing into one guy and then your team just blows up because of the you know, the you didn't kill the bosses evenly. Like it's a mechanic, but it's not really that interesting of a mechanic where it feels like, you know, oh yeah, we did this great.
I think it's not inherently bad. There are a couple reasons that I think this. One is that if you have a twin boss, and like take old workshop first boss, the second you killed the tank, the fight was a target dummy for the most part.
Yeah, sure.
I'm pretty sure the only thing that Metal Tin Can did was did an occasional whirlwind, and I think that was it.
That whirlwind killed me a few times, Larry. Let's put some respect on that ability.
But overall, like I think in the case where a twinned boss happens, I do think that when you kill one and the fight becomes a joke is incredibly boring.
Yeah.
Just because usually you're then removing half the mechanics. Now, there can be fights where that exists, because I do think that is kind of a fun thing to do, like a cleanup of a half boss, but I don't think every boss needs to be like that. I mean, personally, I think if the boss fight is tuned for two bosses doing two sets of mechanics, then it'll become boring once you kill one, or they can tune it around the double mechanics and force you to kill them at the same time.
So how many bosses next season are actually like that? So obviously there's the workshop boss, there's the Floodgate boss. There isn't any in Theater Pain. There isn't any Mother Load. Actually, yeah, the Theater Pain one's the first boss in Theater Pain.
The first boss, I think, is still a. I think the first boss is still a kill in order.
Yeah,
The first boss is the opposite.
This is a
right?
Zerg,
like
yeah.
But they did the Theater of Pain first boss is when you kill one, the other two cast their ultimates more.
Well, yeah, I mean, and in his defense, it has the same effect, right? Of it's a boss where if you're not deciding where you do your damage wisely, you get punished heavily for it.
Yeah, sure.
But I do think you focus Theater of Pain boss, the first boss, still. Like, I think you're gonna kill Dessia immediately. I think you are going to rip Dessia out of existence still. Because she's the
want to.
Metery are always all single target bosses. Cleft.
There is a weird duo boss in Cleft, right? The one that guy like charges you or something, or is that a single boss? Shoot,
I think it's.
I just blacked that part out of my memory.
I think it's a single boss.
Cleft is the mine carts, then it's the candle, then it's the axe thrower, then it's the darkness.
Yeah, so it's 3 single target bosses. Rookery, they're all single target. Yeah, and Priori, they're all single target.
Yeah.
So it's basically Floodgate and Workshop.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so I would say there's not an overwhelming amount of them where it feels like a problem, but at the same time, I can understand why it's frustrating.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, is this actually a theme that's going to be super common? Because, like, I think that there are themes that Blizzard will tend to use, particularly like this season. I think that like a theme that they're using a ton is like one big single target priority mob and a bunch of mobs that surround it, and that's like pretty much every single pull that you're doing is one mob that has 130% of HP of the rest of the pack compared to the rest of the pack, and you just like focus that guy down.
I think the problem that I would have it is if it's like Old Stone Vault, where if a single tick went off, like more than 2 seconds, you die.
That was dumb. Like I don't think I don't think that should have killed you instantly. Especially Dordlita spawned at 30% more health than the other mob.
Yeah, and workshops like not workshops. The new dungeon, Operation Floodgate. The enrage isn't that bad. It's 20% damage every 4 seconds.
That's livable.
That's not bad.
That's fine.
That's not that bad. Like, especially if you kill the lady first, it's just the ogre beating on your tank, which is fine. If you kill you can see the ogre is enraged here. Like, he's enraged. You can see him like, oh no, not yet. Hold on.
As Tettles is just dead on the floor.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's relax.
Now the lady's enraged.
Yeah, put some respect on my name. Yeah, but I mean, they didn't wipe us instantly.
It's fine. Like, I think this one's fine. The workshop one is pulsing damage that increases by 20% every couple seconds. I think that one's fine, as long as the base damage isn't like the original Stone Bolt. So I think it's fine.
Yeah. I don't like whenever they hammer too hard into like weird themes. I do think it's a little bit strange if they go way too hard on specific themes. But I don't know if this is necessarily one that's like super common. I will say that like if it's a real problem, they should probably just like link the bosses together, kind of similar to what we saw in Noku Defensive.
Nix and Vix.
Yeah,
Nix and Vix.
Yeah, same ones.
I think the only concern with it, and the reason I think this question is asked is it is a problem for pugs. I think it's an interesting small decision to make to be like, okay, Dorlita's too high, swap to Dorlita. But for pugs, that is a problem.
You spam ping, bro.
Yeah, I think I think the mechanic is fair, and I think it's also like very, very visible. You know, like you're blatantly neglecting the mechanics of the boss if you're just to be wailing into one of them when you need to kill them evenly. So I mean, like if you're doing a higher mythic plus and you have teammates that are blatantly neglecting the mechanics of bosses, you're gonna wipe and you're gonna die, right? Like that's not really, you know, you shouldn't be able to always win every boss single-handedly by yourself. You know, maybe they can consider like, so one suggestion that I see a lot is like, as instead of like damage events, like damage down events, you know, like let's say when one of the bosses dies, the other boss gets like a 90% DR. So like if you did that, you're just like, shoot, like we just trolled our timer and now we have to sit here, right? Like that's a sort of punishment that, because like let's say it's a boss where it pulses AoE damage when it enrages, like it almost feels like a healer mechanic, right? Like even though the healer has no control over it and basically is meant to kill you, just like changing the punishment of the mechanic in a way so it feels like it's, I don't want to say punishing the right person, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't like bleed in and create other problems, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it's a big enough issue to worry about too much, though.
Yeah. All right. That's it. That's it for us this week. We will be back next week. It actually sounds like we proc Squishy next week, so we actually will have him. Maybe we'll also get a guest.
Yeah, we told him he's not allowed to go on vacation. I mean, we didn't put out an episode last week, so that motherfucker better not be leaving.
Damn.
All right.
Slave to the grind.
Well, we'll be on vacation for another week, and we will see you guys next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Peace.